There are three types of bankruptcy that we deal with. There's a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is a liquidation. There's also what we call Chapter 11 and Chapter 13 bankruptcies, which are reorganizations. In a Chapter 7, a trustee is appointed, and the trustee becomes the owner of everything you own. And it's the job of the trustee to sell what you own and put some money in the pot for the poor, unsecured, and priority creditors. They say those secured creditors can take care of themselves. Well, to sell something you own, the trustee must do 5 things. And if the trustee can't do those 5 things, then he can't sell your property. First of all, the trustee must pay off any lien. So if you've got mortgages on your house, the trustee must pay off those mortgages first. Secondly, the trustee must pay you your exemption. Thirdly, the trustee needs to pay a liquidator. Trustee is not going to sell your car herself. She's going to hire somebody. That's called a liquidator. Fourth, the trustee's got to pay herself. She doesn't do it for free. And then finally, there's got to be a little bit of money left over after all those other things are paid to put some money in the pot for the unsecured and the priority creditors. Now, Chapter 7 is normally going to be over in about 150 days. You're in, you're out in 150 days. You should be able to go into bankruptcy with all the assets, and you should be able to come out of bankruptcy with all the assets you can afford to keep. You should go into bankruptcy with all your debt, and you should come out of bankruptcy with no debt. Of course, there are exceptions to that, and it all depends upon your particular situation. As I mentioned earlier, there are certain debts that are not going to be discharged, and those would be include taxes and family court obligation. There are certain assets that you're going to have that may not be protected because you have so much equity in them. But the concept behind Chapter 7 is to go into bankruptcy with all your assets and come out of bankruptcy with all the assets that you can afford to keep. You go into bankruptcy with all of your debt and then come out of bankruptcy without any debt. And that's done in about 150 days. Now, moving over for a moment, between Chapters 11 and 13, which are reorganization, those are going to be at least 5 years. So, you might go, well, Kev, why would you put me in a 5-year deal over a 150-day deal? Well, there's 3 reasons why we would do that. Why we would suggest you file Chapter 11 or 13 instead of a Chapter 7. And I keep 11 and 13 together. I will separate them when it's appropriate. There are 3 reasons why you would file Chapter 11 or 13 instead of 7. One reason is that you're making too much money and they're not going to let you in Chapter 7. Now, in South Carolina, there are certain limits on how much money you can make, and if you exceed those limits, then your case is put under a microscope in certain Chapter 7s as to whether or not they'd even let you file Chapter 7. If you have more business-related debt than consumer-related debt, that is not going to be much of a problem. On the other hand, if you've got more consumer-related debt, and consumer-related debt is debt incurred, so when did you incur it? For household personal reasons. If you have more consumer debt than business debt, it's everything about how much money you make. They really, really look at that closely. So, the point is this: one reason why you do a 5-year deal, Chapter 11, Chapter 13, instead of a Chapter 7, 150 days, is that you're making too much money and they won't let you in Chapter 7. Second reason is that you have assets that the trustee in a Chapter 7 is going to liquidate. You've got a car that doesn't have a lien on it and it's worth $30,000. Well, I need my car to go to work. Well, that's not the concern of the Chapter 7 trustee. You're going to lose that car in a Chapter 7. So if you have assets like that $30,000 car that you're going to lose in a Chapter 7, your alternative would be to file a Chapter 11 or 13, because what happens is you would maintain possession of the car, you would go through a hypothetical Chapter 7. I'm not in 7, I'm in 11 or 13, but if I was in Chapter 7, what would the creditors ultimately receive from that car? Because in a Chapter 7, to receive anything from the car, any lien would have to be paid off, the trustee would have to be paid, your exemption would have to be paid, the liquidator would have to be paid. So that $30,000 car, the creditors, the priority and unsecured creditors, would probably get about $5,000, $6,000 at the end of the day. So what happens in 11 and 13, you hold on to the car, but you got to pay that $5,000 or $6,000 through that 5-year plan using your disposable income. So, second reason, 11 or 13 over 7, is that you have an asset or assets that you simply can't put into play, and you have no way of buying them back from the trustee. The trustee just soon sell them back to you in the Chapter 7. You have no way of doing that. Rather than losing those assets, you can't afford to lose those assets, you file 11 or 13. Third reason why you file 11 or 13 instead of a 7 is that you have some debt you can't deal with in a 7, you can deal better with in 11 and 13. An example, they've just repossessed your car. Well, in a 7, there's no help. In a 7, if you've got a secured creditor, like a lien on your car, Ford Motor Credit owes, Ford Motor Credit on your car, you need to be up to date with payments, and you need to be able to continue to make payments. If you are behind in payments, you can't make payments in the future, then and you want to keep that car, Chapter 7 isn't for you. A second thing is that you've got a foreclosure pending on your home. Chapter 7 may not be the best way to resolve that foreclosure. I wish we had a little more time, and certainly if you come in, I'll be glad to discuss the HAMP program, Home Affordable Modification. It's a real deal these days. It's a real deal these days of trying to modify your home loan. The point is, more than likely, if that home is in foreclosure, you're behind in payments and really are having a hard time making payments in the future, Chapter 7 isn't going to be for you. On the other hand, in a Chapter 11 and 13, you can get the house out of foreclosure. You can make, as long as you maintain your normal monthly payments, unless you can get them modified, and you can catch up the payments you're behind over 5 years, so that when you exit Chapter 11 or 13, you'll still have your home, payments are caught up, and you're able to make payments in the future. Another good example of why you would file Chapter 11 or 13 instead of 7 because of a debt is you owe taxes. You owe $90,000 worth of taxes. Well, in a Chapter 7, those taxes more than likely are not going to be discharged. There are certain ways you can discharge taxes in a Chapter 7. I'd be glad to discuss those with you, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to discharge those taxes. You're going to come out of Chapter 7 still owing that money, and the tax man's going to be waiting for you. Very, very painful. Well, what happens in Chapter 11 or 13, you come up with a way from your disposable income of paying those taxes back, oftentimes without penalty and sometimes without interest. So Chapter 11 or 13 are good for those three reasons. Making too much money will let you in 7. You have assets that are at risk from trustee in Chapter 7 selling, or you've got some debt you can't deal with. Now, just quickly to separate Chapters 11 and 13, the key word is flexibility, and then a second key word is cost, because Chapter 11s are a little bit more flexible, but they cost money. They cost more money than in Chapter 13. In Chapter 13, what happens is you file a case, you file a plan, the plan gets confirmed, and you start making payments under the plan, and you must be completed within 5 years. It cannot go longer than that. Chapter 11, you file the case, You file the plan in 6 to 10 to 12 months, maybe even longer. It takes about 4 months to get your plan approved, and then you start making payments under the plan, and there's no time limit. So if you've got a big asset that you want to keep, you're looking at your disposable income and it's not going to be enough to pay that equity over the next 5 years, in a Chapter 13, you could be stuck. But you could add another year or 2 years or longer, because there's no time frame for a Chapter 11 to be completed. You just have got to let the court and creditors know how much time you want when you file your plan. So the key is flexibility, and but it's also they're more expensive, because the people who file Chapter 11s are people who normally owe more money, they have more assets, they have, maybe their income is a little erratic. They make a lot of money, they don't make any money. Make a lot of money, don't make a lot of money. As compared to, a Chapter 13 is, good example of a Chapter 13 debtor. Some person who works, gets that paycheck every Friday, maybe a couple payments behind on his car, and the car is being threatened to be foreclosed, owes some credit cards, behind in payments on his house. So it's called, by the way, a wage earner plan. So that's why. Why it is a better fit when you have that person getting that paycheck every week.